Okay, as I mentioned earlier, I was going to talk about this B model a little bit in the paint job. Now, in the materials section, I mentioned the paints I use, but one thing I forgot to cover is there's also some other spray paints that you can use, particularly Krylon Fusion style paints. Now, make sure you get Krylon Fusion paint, as basic Krylon will tend to bubble the foam up a bit. I found that out on Moonbeam McSwine when I actually painted it with just Krylon aluminum color paint, and it actually caused the foam to alligator just a little bit, so I had to go back over it with the Tamiya with an airbrush. But oddly, in saying that, on these D-Day stripes, this is what I'm going to talk about on this airplane, I did the white with this Krylon Indoor-Outdoor Flat White paint, and I had no problem. I don't know why it was different, but it was. The D-Day stripes were the interesting part that I painted. After this, I'm going to go over the template that I made to do these. These are actual scaled out, measured out right D-Day stripes. I found out what the actual measurements were on the real airplanes. All the aircraft had the same width D-Day stripes. It was a standard thing. There were no thin ones, no thick ones. Now, in talking about the stripes historically, now obviously we have D-Day stripes here. White, black, white, black, white. That's the order they're supposed to be in. I only know of one airplane that had it wrong, and it was a guy in the 487th Fighter Squadron, or the 352nd Fighter Group. His crew chief did it backwards on accident. So he had black, white, black, white, black. But in general, they were all the same dimensions. And then you probably notice in some pictures you see airplanes that just have one black stripe, maybe a white stripe, maybe have one stripe on top and full D-Day on the bottom. As the war progressed after D-Day, some of the guys went with just D-Day stripes on the underside and nothing on top. If you see the single stripes, those are called ETO bands, European theater. Some of the planes had them, the aluminum planes had them in black. The planes at Ralph Drab had them in white. Mediterranean theater had them in yellow. And they were usually just a single stripe. So that's what that was all about. And then as the war progressed on, later on, they just went to having no stripes at all. They didn't care. So the D-Day stripes, how I painted these, this is where the only place I used masking. I used the blue painter's tape, and a couple gentlemen mentioned how to do it correctly, because unfortunately, no matter how careful you are, when you use masking, you're going to wind up peeling up some of the paint you already put on. So just prepare to have to do some touch-ups. It's a given. But what I did here is I masked off the outsides. You'll see a little bit later when I show the template. The whole thing, for the Parkzone Mustang, to get it scaled correct, the whole width is 7.5 inches. Each stripe is 1.5 inches. And what I did is I just masked off the edges and sprayed the whole thing white, and then went back over, marked out my lines, and then brush painted the black on it, with the exception of up here, because it's plastic. I did spray that, I believe. And I don't think there's any brush strokes in there. But the stuff on the foam, paint on the foam, you can actually brush it on. As I mentioned before, the Z-foam hides brush strokes pretty good. So the black was just brush painted on. And that's how I did the D-Day stripes. But to de-tack the tape a little bit, just put it on the top of your hand and peel it off. It doesn't hurt. It's not like getting a wax. I've never had it done, but I have seen the movie 40-Year-Old Virgin. Pretty funny. Yeah, so just de-tack the tape a little bit by putting it on your hand, peel it up. It'll still stick and do its job, but it won't stick so much that it peels the paint up, and even worse, peel up some of the foam. So that was it on the D-Day stripes. Pretty simple process, but it is a little bit time consuming. So if you choose to go with that, that's how it's done. That's the measurements, and I'm going to show you the template next. Okay, here's the template I have for the D-Day stripes. To make it the correct scale for your Parkzone Mustang, the overall width of the entire thing is 7.5 inches, each stripe being 1.5 inches. So you get that measured out, get your straight lines going back. As you can see, that's going to be the correct scaling for your D-Day stripes. So there's your template. Write that down, and you'll have a pretty accurate, historically correct Mustang.